Hi, it's Gus here. This is a continuation of my miniature series, which I've kind of been going through a lot of the Games Workshop's old Lord of the Rings and Hobbit figures from years gone by. And this will probably be the second part of either the Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings section. I did 2 videos before. So if you're new to this channel, then I should say that I'm someone who's been in the miniature world for quite a while now. I used to sculpt figures for small companies, Kickstarters back in the day when that was a big deal, back in the, I'd say 2013, 2014 period. And I'm a miniature painter as well, and have a part of the European circuit, so I know a lot of the guys from, I'd say, Germany and Spain and England especially. And I've won in Golden Demons, and yeah, so it's kind of my scene, and my profession right now is in the stop motion industry as a model maker and an animator. So I kind of assume you kind of know a bit already about my channel, so I'm just going to zip along and see what else we can find here. We have here the Ruffians. Now, the Ruffians came out with the Scouring of the Shire set, so it was kind of off of the books more than the films. These characters were kind of obviously taken out of the films to give it a more, more conclusive ending with the Battle of the Black Gate and the destruction of the ring. Obviously, that would be like another 20-minute section of the film if it was included. So yeah, some nice enough figures here. They keep in line with the kind of aesthetic of the film. Painting wise, it's hard to say there's much fun to be had here. I mean, I think this guy would be really fun to paint. You do have some blending work you can do on the clothing, a bit of detail stuff on the face, which is fine. What you really want, as I've said before, is a combination of different textures and different materials to show off your ability and your skill. And a really nice, cool pose like this, I think, would be brilliant. The whip's a bit weird because obviously it's wrapping in on itself, but Games Workshop love their whips, and yeah, it is a shame. Something like a long, winding whip is often really cool to look at, but these are a bit duller. And obviously the classic bow pose, which I think it's one pose fits all with Games Workshop. A lot of their fantasy range have the exact same pose as this. I think it's quite a dull pose, but it's brilliant for just having your militia, your figures lined up in a row. It looks really cool. You got 8 to 16 plus of these figures, and they're firing at an opposing army. It can be really fun. So moving swiftly on, these Outriders, I don't remember these at the time. I think they came out later. I kind of left the industry for a short while in late 2000s. I like some things going on here. It's a bit I don't know, nothing too special. Nice variation on the bow pose, pointing up further higher up. This is the regular one I think I see all the time. Let's have a look here. These came out with the Hobbit figures, obviously. I've mentioned before that I thought the designs of these are a bit kind of what we've seen before in many ways, but looking at them now, they actually do look quite pretty. They've combined obviously the more eastern styles. Obviously it's a more eastern part of Middle Earth, so they can afford to do that, and it obviously pays off. Some really beautiful costumes here, and yeah, interesting aesthetic. One thing I thought was a shame with the lake town was obviously it's a town on a lake. It's humans. They have these sort of I would say almost Asian Mongolian aesthetic, which kind of doesn't fully play into the people of the lake town itself. It suggests they're picking up a style from another culture, which is kind of like, I kind of want to see that culture. You know what I mean? The Easterlings' costumes were brilliant, really unique, and they only appear very shortly, but it kind of makes sense. It's like, okay, they find that's their culture, but for these guys, it feels like I don't know, it feels like that need to be explained. Their culture needs to be kind of built out a bit. It does feel like they're kind of mimicking another culture. Maybe it's just because obviously you'd expect people from wearing this kind of costumes would be more from obviously that sort of descent, sort of Asian descent. maybe it's that playing in my brain, so it just seems a bit weird. Lake Town, obviously, they're quite Caucasian or European, which is obviously Tolkien's experiences, which he was kind of going off of. So I thought maybe they're a little bit too, although they are beautiful figures and beautiful costumes, maybe they're more European based on Tolkien's focus. But that's not Miniature's fault. That's Games Workshop's fault. That's the Weta's Workshop. But when I say it's their fault, it was still really beautiful, and they needed to play around with different costume ideas. So I don't blame them at all for going for a more Eastern look. Let's have a look. These are really kind of classic just orc figures. You just want them to be looking all grimy and evil, and yeah, not much opportunity for. I mean, yeah, someone who knows how to paint can paint these really nicely, but the poses themselves aren't super cool rock star. This is kind of fun, but you like character, a bit of, shades of character, and I think this fella, as I said before, it could suggest a character, a likable, maybe a villain, you could say. What do you call him? Long John Silver kind of character. It's funny to see these newer figures. When I say newer, they're from the last 10 years, whereas the Lord of the Rings were from like 20 years ago, is that the plastics were able to kind of do more fun stuff with the flowing clothing, whereas if these essentially Wood Elves or Mirkwood Rangers, if they were made, I'd say around the year 2000, these pointy bits would be definitely more flattened off, and you would see them, but they'll be only there on the side, and there would be kind of similar to the ones they've made during that era. These are kind of pointing in all sorts of directions, and that's because obviously the plastics, the rubber mold or whatever, it kind of crushes them on a kind of, what would you say, perpendicular level. So it doesn't really work with this level of detail back then, but now we can do so much cool stuff. Let's have a look. Scrolling further down, some nice stuff here. I think some of this I've already talked about and shown off in previous videos, so I'll speed through a lot of this. These Haradrim Warriors, I remember getting these at the time. These were kind of showed off my Mimikill quite nicely, because I had one of those big Mimikill things. I'm not sure they have. It's probably further down. But yeah, these are a bit of fun. These little jewels are always nice to work on. Not incredible poses, but just what you'd expect from the miniature poses. As detailed as you'd like. Nothing much to say here, other than that they worked quite nicely with a Mimikill character. Now, these Uruk-hai Scouts were really wonderful to paint, and that was mainly because of the colour schemes you could use. They were really lovely rustic brown colours. I love the red of the skin, and the silver was really fun to paint. Bit of an ink wash, and then obviously you've got the brown clothing as well, or drapery, and then to really finish it off, you just give it a little white hand of Saruman here and there. Really pops out the figures. Really, really pretty figures, and they're all in fantastic running poses, which obviously reflects the film when you see them in the Fellowship of the Ring. But also when you have an army of these, and they really are running at the opposing army, they're not stiff and stagnant. They're really kind of got character to them. Yeah, all around really, really nice army to look at. Definitely one of my favourites. Rangers, they were fine enough. I've been through a lot of these. This Ent came on later on. Now this paint job's quite nice. Obviously they've had to work quite quickly, but I'm always impressed by Games Workshop painters, how you can see their paint jobs are fairly rapid, quick. They don't want to spend too long on them because they've got a lot of work to do. You work in there, you're working by the hour, and it's like, come on, is it done yet? You know what I mean? You could imagine there'd be a lot of pressure. One of the fellas I knew who used to work at Games Workshop in the kind of painting department would tell us other painters, Golden Demon painters, how much they really had to work so fast, and then they'd maybe have a quick little drink at, was it Bogman's Bar or whatever it was called, before heading back to the studio to crank out more of these. It was all the techniques here. It's not just skill of obviously knowing color, contrast, and painting, and light and shade and depth, but also just how to get a miniature looking really, really professional. painted within the shortest amount of time possible. And this is a classic example. You can see there's just only so many colors being used here, only so many effects, but they've really kind of obviously made use of the time they've had to paint it, and yep, to a very clean, nice looking professional standard. I believe this was a plastic model. Never got it. It wasn't much Golden Demon wise. You'd probably want to play with the colors here. You'd want to play with make the near the base maybe darker, and add some. I definitely added some like water effects, little puddles of water or a stream, and then maybe a tree next to it to contrast this living entity with a non obviously living entity of a tree or something, and I'd also pose it probably differently, and throw in a few dead orcs here and there for fun and contrast. Let's have a look here. These Moria Goblins are one of the first miniatures I got back in 2002. They're really fun little figures. For my bases, I kind of followed the rulebook for Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, and some random painter had given them purple bases, so I naturally decided to give all my Moria Goblins purple bases for inexplicable reasons. But the purple did really show off nicely with the red, and I think the kind of the pale green, the fleshy green. Definitely love this little army. It's nice having have a massive goblin army. These were really the lowest pointed in the game itself. They're really low points, so you could really have a massive army of these little fellas, and really kind of definitely a fun little army to play. But then you could have a few evil heroes alongside these guys for effect. Galadriel Warriors, I never got these at the time. They came out later. Back in the day, you gotta feel sorry for everyone who got the metal ones, a metal army of these, because these only came out in metal for the first practically 10 years. I'd say almost maybe only, could have been just 5, but at least 5 years. The only way to get these figures were in metal, which is obviously far more expensive, and some people did. Some people went for it and got them in metal, and then of course these came out, and one like equals one tier kind of situation. These are pretty nice, pretty fun. There's not too much going on pose wise, nothing you'd want to do a Golden Demon with. I actually wanted to do a Golden Demon with a goblin figure. I never got fully round to it. I think it was this figure here. It's a really beautiful little face and everything, just to be an ironic figure, and it was painted really beautifully. It'd be nice to say you'd won Golden Demon with a tiny little goblin with a nice little scenic little base. So maybe might do that one day. Warriors of the Dead are super easy to paint, and gaming wise they weren't anything special, so I never really bothered. Their rules weren't amazing in the game either, so hence why I didn't bother. I could one day definitely get tempted to use these in like a diorama, or a duel for Golden Demon. I mean, a lot of miniatures for me is less so much about the game, it's more about the Golden Demon, and I could imagine maybe a little duel or something, but it's hard you need to find a reason really. Again, nice painting job there by whoever worked on them. I feel like Games Workshop I'm sure they used to have the names of the person who painted, let's say, what's presented here, the production copy, and the sculptor as well back in the day. I swear I do have vague memories of 5-10 years ago, when I was heavily into the world, the professional world, getting into the professional world. I swear they had the names of people, so it was cool because I had my personal collection of folders of who worked on what, and you could really see what their skills were sculpting or painting wise. So it's a shame, it is a real shame that you don't see this here. I don't see that anywhere, no names of anyone of who's worked on these. This is obviously from way back from the first release. Nice little figure. Obviously this is just a pure diorama. I don't know who would ever use Sauron. Sauron was a kind of a sad figure to look at when I'd see it on battlefields, or when I see it kind of in the production on the shelf, because it'd be so cool looking, but there's not much opportunity for painting variations. What I always appreciated about the Warhammer figures was that they always designed them to be both gamed with and painted, and so certain features were distorted or accentuated. There's extreme facial expressions, or let's say kneecaps, or whatever they've got, armor plating, but it was all designed for painters to have the most fun. This isn't really designed for painters. It's just a really beautiful design done by Weta Workshop back in the day, probably late 90s, I'd imagine, this design. And yeah, it looks great on film, but obviously it's quite a dark figure for painting. It's very simple, just silver and cloth, black cloth, which is doesn't add much fun. Maybe a little flower effect in the background can make this a bit more fun, or flying arrows. Did some cool flying arrow effects. It's hard to say, but yeah, it's I don't know. It's not something that I'd necessarily want to enter into Golden Demon with, because there's not much to play with. Candice Warriors were, they were all right. They weren't nothing too special here. They were, obviously going for a more Eastern aesthetic, perhaps where the where the Lake Town men got their a lot of their designs influenced from. Yeah, no, cool. That's all good. It's obviously the Games Workshop designs there. I'm always impressed by how many miniatures Games Workshop produced over like 20 years for Lord of the Rings. I can't ever complain about the lack of figures, because they have so many different characters and designs and everything. Just double check this time of this video. I can't really tell. Yeah, well, I think we'll wrap this up soon. But yeah, we'll just continue a bit longer. Obviously, this is for the Hobbit figures, because the wargs are more traditional wolf looking, which is obviously reflective of maybe the more folk tales of, I'd imagine, Denmark, Sweden, was it Norway? I'm at a loss for words, but the Beowulf territory of folktales. They're kind of classic wolves, the myth of the wolf, obviously, which can be seen even in more modern times with Brothers Grimm in Little Red Riding Hood. Obviously, it goes back many years. Humans have been constantly, dealing with the threat of wolves, and obviously being able to tame wolves once they maybe get them as pups. Yeah, no, they're nice enough figures. You can imagine entering them into Golden Demon. No worries. Let's have a look at just a few more, and I'll call it a day. So, yeah, nice. As I've said before, I've never ever been a fan of the rock bases. Never ever been a fan of them, because when you're gaming, they're perfectly fine for painting, but for gaming, it just looks a bit surreal to have. It feels like your team leader has been basically running 6 inches across the battlefield, 6 inches at a time, because obviously that's most of the time most normal figures move 6 inches, and then find another rocky outcrop to stand on, and then 6 inches. Also for shooting, if an opponent has a bow and arrow, obviously has an army of archers, or partial army of archers, then having these on a rock base isn't exactly perfectly good for keeping your heroes out of sight of a volley of arrows. So yeah, I've never really been a huge fan of these. That's a nice little banner bearer there, very nice. And yeah, I'll probably just wrap it up with some of these banner bearers here and call it a day. So this came out in Return of the King times, back in 2003, and yeah, that was a lovely little figure. This character was obviously seen in the films, extended editions, but also I really love this fella from the game Return of the King. This would be the, if you got your Samwise Gamgee trying to break into Cirith Ungol, or Cirith Ungol, depending how you say it. There'd be a few of these fellows to have to beat, so it's always nice to see characters which you're familiar from either other Lord of the Rings merchandise and on the films themselves. Obviously, there's a shaman there. They didn't go into too much into that in the movies. This orc captain was fairly generic. There really wasn't anything special about him that made him separated him from the other orcs. But then the orcs are so unique, it's hard to make a character, really a character captain, orc captain. But yeah, some nice enough figures here. Especially I love this one especially. I can imagine doing all sorts of painting wise. I think there's just some fun stuff you could do here, especially diorama. I might do a little Cirith Ungol diorama one day. Let's have a look, and I'll just wrap it up probably on these ones here. So yeah, as you can see, a few more banner bearers. This Minas Tirith, these come out later. This is new to me, definitely. This fella here, I've not seen him before. Going for like a Roman look almost here with the way he's designed and the little wreath on his head. running characters. Again, this is definitely really fun if you're playing a game, not necessarily always for painting, but for gaming. Having characters running can be kind of cool when you have an whole army of characters. And if they're too stiff, it can be a bit of a boring army. But especially if you charge him into combat, that looks really cool, I'd imagine. Easterlings. I always love the Easterling kind of design and color choices here, because they've obviously not just got the gold and the red combo. It's different textures, it's different materials, and even the gold you could play with blue. They did a lot of blue in the oxidizing of the metal or whatever you call it, of the gold or whatever you call it. That was some really cool effects you could do with these, which I ended up doing with some of my figures, which I can show it at some point if I can get this working. Some older stuff here. And here we go. So this is what I entered into Golden Demon 2006, and there's a little conversion here. I'll show the further one back. So yeah, I had my little Easterling here, all non-metallic metals, which I kind of regret at the time. Regret now, less so much at the time. These paints are kind of embarrassing to look at now, because I mean the painting is so it's so chalky. I wasn't using enough waters in my paints at the time, but there's definitely some fun ideas going on here with the sculpts, with the characters. This fella was practically completely sculpted, as you can see, from scratch. Same with this fella, same with the Easterling. So there was a lot of hard work being put into these. I'll put this different angle. Yeah, so there's a lot of really cool, fun ideas. Obviously, sculpting here with the milliput isn't probably as practical as using green stuff, which would have given when you're pushing a sculpting tool into it and you're pulling it upwards through green stuff, it gives you the nice whip look that fire has, whereas milliput would be like more, as you can see here, it's podgier, and it's a missed opportunity. And the painting on the flag is painful to look at now, it really is. But obviously, early attempts, which eventually led to success at Golden Demon years down the line. So yeah, eventually, obviously, when I go through this channel, I can talk more about these other little figures, like obviously the Rabbit of Keir Banog from Monty Python. I worked on this and made my own rule set for him. I was one of the first miniatures I sculpted back in 2005, it was he unleashed him on the battlefield, and everyone would complain about how he's so overpowered, but then obviously the rules, he could just be killed at any time. For the stray arrow. And this was me again, another really early miniature I did years ago. I look really podgy here, but I did actually wear those clothes, and that's actually the Lord of the Rings rulebook, and I made a set of rules for myself as well. I was playing with a lot of ideas, even way as far back as 2005. Even here, you have the Lord of Star Wars. I made a whole rule set. I believe it was how many pages? 76 pages rule set for Star Wars, just as a fun fan thing for a miniature game, a proper Games Workshop style miniature game where you're moving each figure individually, and they've got multiple force powers similar to the Lord of the Rings or the Warhammer 40k rule sets. So it's a shame that that's never been made, because that would have been a really amazing game had that been someone ever worked that out. Obviously some Yoda here, and I'm really quite proud of this, even though this is a 2007 figure. You can see I was really starting to get miniature sculpting at the time. I'm still in awe of this nice little cloth here I managed. I mean, the cloak's a bit generic and podgy in places, but this bit of cloth on his flowing cloth just still impresses me. Impress myself, it's shocking. But yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. Another figure I did, Fingolfin, inspired obviously from the Lord of the Rings figures, Last Alliance figures, because that's the kind of universe. But it was a figure that I tried to show off have look fun to paint from different angles. But this is more reflective of, I suppose, the metal figure set Games Workshop produce, and also their Warhammer Fantasy, since they really are made for painting. Lord of the Rings have to be kind of constrained to the look and designs of Weta Workshop, which is obviously made for film. Similar to way a book maybe needs to be adapted, maybe the figures need to be adapted, but at the same time I'm glad they didn't, because the Weta Workshop is just so you just want to play with the figures that you've seen in the movies. I'll eventually go through my various sort of podcasts, or whatever you call this, YouTube videos. Hope you enjoyed, and if you like this, please like the video and subscribe, and ciao for now.